Hi everyone, this is Joe Brewer here, and today I want to share with you our vision for the funding ecosystem that we imagine and that we are creating to be able to help regenerate the earth. And so the title for today's talk is The Great Legacy of Our Times, Financial Flows that Restore Water and Life on Earth. I want us to imagine creating financial flows into learning ecosystems for regeneration in local communities all over the world. And to think of this as a network of funding pools where there can be flows that go into one pool and then move to another and then move to another in a natural way, just as water moves across the planet. And this network of funding pools can help us to regenerate the earth if it's organized in the right way. So said another way, this is like flowing water into regenerative funding pools so that we can regenerate the earth. So if we were to take all of the world's water and gather it into one place, you'd see that the volume of the water is actually really tiny, but the water is not concentrated in the way that it's depicted here. But unfortunately, the world's financial wealth is depicted in this way, in that more than 99% of the world's wealth is held in the hands of about 1% of the human population. And so it's being blocked and held and kept from flowing, something that we really need to address. And if you look at the way that water actually flows, you'll see that water is constantly circulating and flowing from one place to another across the planet. And so we have envisioned a system of financial flows that works in the same way that water does, that can move into and between bioregions just like water, bringing life and resilience wherever it goes and flowing at the speed of trust. So our timeline for the work is to start now in November of 2025, and we have a vision, a very ambitious vision of what we want to achieve by 2026 in December. So we want to start by gathering individuals who want to evolve and create the new philanthropic system. So we want to create the Earth Regeneration Flow Fund Work Group, a set of people who help us to create the funding structures and the scaling that we're trying to achieve. And for us to learn by doing, we have our first stretch goal, which is to stretch from the funding we have now to raise an additional $1 million by March of 2026, and to have that funding really focus on strengthening Bhattacharya's learning ecosystem for reasons that I'll explain in a moment. And basically, as we're raising this funding, we're going to be learning together how to hack the financial system that's in place and do it by practicing creating financial flows based on trust into bioregions around the world. And then between March and December, our second stretch goal is to raise $5 million so that we grow the amount of funding even more and have the money flow into strategic initiatives both in Bhattacharya and across the northern Andes into a tapestry of territories that we're working with. So we have been living into the design pathway for regenerating Earth for several years now. What this means in practical terms is that we have been helping to create a planetary network of bioregions where people do place-based organizing to do regenerative work in their own landscapes. And we've created a living laboratory that is grounded in practice and has already mobilized more than $2 million into an emergent planetary network of bioregions where learning exchanges continually take place. This began in 2020 with the launch of the Design Pathway book and the birth of the Earth Regenerators community. Then between 2020 and 2022, we launched the Living Laboratory for Bioregional Scale Regeneration in Bhattacharya, Colombia. In March of 2023, we created the Design School for Regenerating Earth to build the planetary network of bioregions. In February of 2024, we hosted the 7th Generation Bioregional Earth Summit, and we launched Bioregional Earth with our partners at the Legacy Project, and we shared the vision for how we could build a tapestry of regeneration across the planet. And then throughout 2025, up until the present, we have been building out our capacities to create a planetary scale implementation of the design pathway for regenerating Earth. Our vision is to see the Earth fully regenerated through deep patterns of healing in local landscapes across the planet. And we have this real-world prototype in Colombia, and through the design school, there are people beginning to organize locally on 5 different continents. Said another way, we don't just need to imagine a planetary network of place-based efforts, it's already happening, where local groups are sustaining engagement and learning exchanges with financial flows that we're bringing to them. A big focus for us is on learning ecosystems that help us to engage in large-scale regeneration of soils, of watersheds, of forests, and of alternative pathways into regenerative economies. Our funding ecosystem can be divided into 3 different levels, all of which work together. First of all, there's the Barichara Regeneration Flow Fund, which is a local laboratory working at the scale of 1 million acres or 500,000 hectares in the heart of the Northern Andes in Colombia. This is a bioregional funding ecosystem with diverse actors and financial flows engaged in a lot of regenerative work that's been going now for 5 years. Then the next level up is our first regional network, which is the Northern Andes Regeneration Flow Fund, which is a collaboration among 7 Colombian territories, one of which is in Barichara, collaborating to create territorial foundations run by local teams and to engage in large-scale regeneration in each of the 7 territories. And then we have the Earth Regeneration Flow Fund, which is at the planetary scale. And in the first 3 years of building up this funding ecosystem, we have already provided financial support to 12 different territories around the world to help them begin organizing or to deepen their practices in creating bioregional funding ecosystems. Now, in this body of work, one of the models that we're developing that we're not going to talk about in this presentation, but I at least want you to know that it's happening, is in partnership with the Legacy Project. We are building the world's first bioregional Pando funding ecosystem, and we have a way of thinking about scale from any individual regenerative project on a plot of land that moves up to the ecological connections with holistic landscapes and then are embedded within larger planetary processes, things like patterns of precipitation or with movements of water across the land and migratory patterns of animals and so on. And right now, between the Greater Tikaranto bioregion, the GTB, and Barichara, we have similar project funding themes where there are flows that move within the landscape itself, within the bioregional scale, but they're embedded within larger systems. The GTB is embedded within the Great Lakes Basin, and Barichara is in the Northern Andes. And the Great Lakes Basin is part of the North American continent, and the Northern Andes is embedded within South America. And you can see that we're starting to build patterns of North and South exchange between the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere in the GTB and in Barichara, so that we can have deep and robust funding ecosystems in 2 very different locations with continual learning exchanges between them. So, welcome to the Earth Regeneration Trust, where we pool resources and flow them into a planetary network of bioregions. This has already been happening for a few years, but we are ready to go big. You can think of it like this. If you think of money flowing into a planetary network, this means we pool financial resources into the planetary network, and then we flow some of those resources into different regional networks. And then at the local level, in local bioregions or local territories, we distribute the financial resources across regenerative processes among local actors, which is leaders of projects and processes in each local landscape. Now, we've already secured about $2.6 million for the next 2 years across our 3 fund pillars, which means there's funding at the level of the Barichara funding ecosystem, the Northern Andes Fund, and in the planetary network. We want to build preparedness for much larger inflows of capital, and the way that we're focusing on doing this in the next year is by ensuring that we have adequate infrastructure to manage these funds, so that we can administer them around how do you distribute the funding, how do you track the way the funding is spent, how do you monitor and evaluate the impacts that are created so that we can demonstrate that this system is actually working. And in order to do this, we need to be able to grow and scale while we're practicing, which means we want to be attracting systems level impact investors and philanthropists to learn with us and to scale our capacities as we go. Thought of another way, what we're doing is creating a patterning for territorial governance to create bioregional economies. So as local community weavers, people who weave together community processes into portfolios and territorial narratives, creating shared frameworks for action, enabling us to have coherent regeneration occur at the territorial or bioregional scale, and to have monitoring systems and tracking systems within and across these different territories so that we have coherent ways of understanding what is working and how to spread best practices across the entire planetary system. So what kinds of impacts can we anticipate from the funders who support this work? Well, this is holistic systems change work, so the impacts that we can anticipate are broad and holistic. For example, local communities as part of our network are going to be better organized to regenerate their local landscapes. This means more community resilience and more capacity for local governance and local leadership within each local community across the entire planetary network. We also envision a big focus on regenerative education programs for children, where we have children that have deeper nature connection, ecological knowledge, and practical life skills. So the children know how to grow food, they know how to identify plants, they know how to grow forest, they know how to restore watersheds, and so on. We envision bringing land into the commons and creating infrastructure for these learning ecosystems. So this means things like creating connectivity for ecological corridors, for doing land system zoning and planning, and identifying what are the places that need ecological conservation, what are the places for mixed use with economic and ecological benefits, and what are the places that are more specifically for human use, like urban zones. And how do we bring land into the commons and create infrastructure for learning at these large holistic scales? And then, of course, healthier rivers and more native forests with carbon stored and biodiversity protected and other kinds of ecological outcomes. And then in terms of economics, local food security and better economic opportunities for living regeneratively and in harmony with nature. So we anticipate a wide variety of impacts and benefits that are created within each community as part of this planetary network, and then also across the regional networks and the planetary network as a whole. So basically, we've already brought together $2.6 million in a seed fund that's being distributed across this network. And our goal by the end of 2026 is to grow this funding to $5 million by December of 2026 in the ways that I've been describing. But we would also like to attract large foundations and large donor networks that would pledge for long-term impacts over the next 15 or 20 years, pooling funding at a scale more like 30 to 50 or even possibly $100 million. But our large vision, which is to regenerate the Earth, is to create a stable Earth regeneration fund with regional networks across the planet with $1 billion or more for regenerating the Earth over the next 50 to 100 years. So we feel like this is the scale that's needed for this vision, and we are setting in motion the structures and patterns to make it possible. So this is really big work that we're talking about. So what is our strategy for raising the next $1 million in the next 5 or 6 months? Well, we have a very clear understanding that the best way for us to do this work is at a human scale, building real and meaningful relationships where there can be a lot of trust. So what we want to do is align with 5 to 10 people, a very small number of people to start, who already advise stewards of wealth. These are people who work in family offices with impact investors or family foundations, or just trusted individuals who have high net worth friends who ask their advice about where they should donate or invest their money. So, to raise this $1 million, we want to find 5 to 10 of these people to advise stewards of wealth who would then pool the first $1 million in the next 6 months into this system. And we want to attract donations into the funding pool, focusing on Bharti-Chara's learning ecosystem because it's the most robust, the most concrete, and the place where we can demonstrate impact immediately. And also, we can invite these 5 to 10 advisors of stewards of wealth, as well as the donors themselves, to experience the work directly by coming to Bharti-Chara, Colombia, and having an immersion in our process, meeting the local people, doing site visits to the local projects so they can see where their money is going. But in parallel with this, as we raise this first $1 million, we need to aim high. And so through the Bioregional Pando Fund, with our partners at the Legacy Project, we're also going to be creating a catalytic cohort of funding partners for philanthropic institutions. This is more at the scale of foundations, impact funds, and donor networks. So that would be at a larger scale than these individual advisors to wealth stewards, but it's work we need to be doing now in parallel with this $1 million fundraising. And then, of course, as these people come together and we build relationships and get to know each other, we attract the initial pool of funding, we invite them to experience the work together. This means that we build trust by learning together. And we feel like this is completely achievable in the time span of 6 months. So that's the scale that we're focusing on between now and roughly March of 2026. So the way that we see this working and why we feel it's important to focus on Bharti-Chara is Bharti-Chara's Regeneration Flow Fund is the first bioregional prototype. It's like a local laboratory. It's already been going for nearly 6 years. It's very advanced. A lot of things are happening, and it's connected to a larger network through what is called the Northern Andes Regeneration Fund, which means we can take the patterns of what we're learning in this local laboratory and replicate those patterns across 6 other territories in the Northern Andes through the existing relationships that we already have. So the ability to have replicable impacts or multiplier effects is by putting $1 million into the Bharti-Chara Fund, it enables us to show that we can move these impacts and learnings immediately into 6 other territories as we make that stretch from raising $1 million to raising $5 million later in 2026. But while we're doing this work within the Northern Andes, through our work in the Design School for Regenerating Earth, we will continue catalyzing bioregional organizing in the planetary network across many different continents. Right now, in our planetary network, we have active members in North America, Central America and South America, Europe, the Mediterranean, Africa, Oceania, and Australia. So almost the entire planet. And then the idea is, as we continue building out this network, we grow our capacities to regenerate the earth. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I want to thank you for your attention and invite us to have a conversation about this. Who are those initial 5 to 10 advisors to stewards of wealth? How do we reach out to them and establish relationships? Are you one of them? Do you maybe know one of them? If so, we would love to have a conversation and start moving this forward because seriously, there is no time to waste. So thank you for your attention, and we'd love to talk with you about all of this. Onward, fellow humans.